Imagine for a second that your brain isn't actually this, biological engine that generates your consciousness.
Right.
I want you to try and picture it instead as like a radio antenna. And its only real job is to try and tune into this vast, invisible signal.
Yeah, that is a huge shift.
It really is. Like, what if everything you think of as, so your memories, your quirky personality, even just your awareness of the room you're sitting in right now, what if none of that actually lives inside your skull?
I mean, it completely shatters the baseline assumption of modern biology.
Totally.
Because, we are so heavily conditioned by this traditional materialistic view of neuroscience, which basically insists that the 100 billion neurons in our brains are just wet biological machines.
Right, just firing away.
Exactly. They fire, they release chemicals, and somehow, miraculously, that biological friction creates the illusion of the mind. But if you flip that entirely, if consciousness is actually a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism, yeah, rather than just a byproduct of biology, I mean, it forces us to completely rewrite the definition of human connection.
And that radical paradigm shift is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We have a seriously fascinating stack of research in front of us, mostly centered around a book called The Consciousness Connection by Dr. Bob Davis.
A fantastic resource.
It is. So the mission for us today is to look at what they call extraordinary human experiences. So we're talking about telepathy, out-of-body travel, near-death experiences. But, and here is the crucial catch for you listening, we aren't approaching this as mysticism or magic.
Right, not at all.
We're looking at these phenomena strictly through the lens of emerging quantum mechanics and, modern consciousness studies.
And I think that's the crucial distinction here. We're exploring a deeply scientific framework that suggests we are all, quite literally, physically plugged into this fundamental field of consciousness.
Yeah.
But to even begin to grasp how your mind could exist outside your physical brain, well, we have to start by completely redefining what the brain's actual day job is.
Okay, yes, let's unpack this because, if my brain isn't busy generating me, what exactly is it doing up there all day?
Right.
The sources actually point back to William James, who is, the father of American psychology. And he proposed a theory over a century ago that is incredibly counterintuitive. He said the brain isn't a creator at all, it's a barrier, it's a filter.
Which, I know it sounds totally absurd until you actually look at it through the lens of evolution.
Right.
I mean, the brain's absolute top priority is just your physical survival. It has to navigate a highly complex, very dangerous three-dimensional world and just keep your body alive.
Yeah.
So if William James is right, there is this supremely expanded universal consciousness out there.
But we don't feel it.
No, because if you were tuned into all of it, like all the cosmic data, all the quantum realities, your nervous system would instantly overload.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to safely cross the street, let alone, hunt for food or run from a predator. Yeah. The text actually calls our daily waking reality a controlled hallucination, which is a wild phrase, but functionally it means your brain is highly curating your reality, aggressively filtering out the infinite noise so you can just focus on, finding your car keys.
Yeah, finding your keys, paying your taxes. The filter isn't a flaw, right? It's a highly efficient evolutionary shield. And Bob Davis brings this century-old theory into the modern era beautifully.
With the smartphone analogy, right?
Yes. We shouldn't look at the brain as an old-school desktop computer with a massive local hard drive where, every single file is stored physically inside the plastic casing. That's the outdated view.
Today, it's more like the smartphone sitting in your pocket.
Precisely.
Because that tiny piece of glass, it processes immediate sensory input like your finger tapping the screen or, in biological terms, managing your breathing and heartbeat. But the heavy lifting, the massive bulk of your data, your photos, your core operating systems.
They aren't living on the physical phone.
Right. They are constantly being pulled down from an ethereal mega resource. You're accessing the cloud.
Which perfectly illustrates the non-local view of the mind. Your consciousness actually resides externally in this massive infrastructure, and your brain is really just the hardware authorized to log into your specific account.
I mean, I love that smartphone analogy. It makes so much sense, but I do have to push back here for a second.
Sure, go for it.
If you and I are both logging into the exact same cosmic cloud of consciousness right now, why don't I constantly hear your thoughts? Like, why is my personal bandwidth so ridiculously narrow?
Well, because your personal firewall is working exactly as intended.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's that mind-brain filter doing its job.
Yeah.
If the brain didn't strictly regulate those data packets coming down from the cloud, we'd be completely paralyzed.
Just overwhelmed by the noise.
Exactly, by the sheer volume of information for billions of other nodes on the network. The narrow bandwidth is what keeps you localized, giving you the illusion of a separate self so you can actually function in the world.
Okay, so what happens if that firewall malfunctions? Or if the filter is somehow altered? Because the research highlights individuals who seem to be operating without that standard throttle on their bandwidth.
They do. And autistic savants are perhaps the most compelling natural example of this.
Right.
You have individuals who might struggle profoundly with standard social or emotional processing, yet they possess truly staggering cognitive abilities that totally defy conventional neurological explanation.
Yeah, the examples in the text are wild. We're talking about children calculating 5-digit cube roots in their heads without even knowing basic addition.
Or a 4-year-old suddenly speaking 6 foreign languages without ever taking a class or even hearing them spoken.
Which is insane. From a conventional standpoint, how does a brain output data it never actually took in?
Well, conventionally it can't. It's just an unsolved mystery.
Yeah.
But apply the non-local mind theory, and it starts making structural sense.
Well, so?
In neurotypical brains, a massive amount of computational power is dedicated to the social operating system, right? Reading facial expressions, filtering environmental noise, maintaining the ego.
Right, the survival stuff.
Yeah. But in the savant brain, that standard filtering mechanism operates differently, or perhaps just doesn't prioritize the same things. Because they aren't bogged down by that specific biological static, their bandwidth to the cloud is naturally wider.
Wow.
They can pull raw mathematical or linguistic data directly from the network.
So they bypass the local hard drive entirely. That makes sense for someone born with a different neurological architecture, but what about the rest of us? Like, can we manually turn down our own filters?
Yeah, we can try. And that is exactly what the Ganzfeld experiment, famously conducted at places like the Rhine Research Center, attempts to do.
Right, Ganzfeld stuff.
Yeah, it's basically an artificial hack to lower the brain's sensory filter to see if telepathic signals, data from the cloud can slip through.
Though I gotta say, to be fair, ping pong balls and red lights sound less like cutting-edge science and more like a very weird spa treatment.
It does sound a little strange.
For those who haven't heard of this, the setup is incredibly eerie. You're placed in an acoustically isolated room in this reclining chair. They literally tape translucent halves of ping pong balls over your eyes, bathe the room in a solid red light, and then play continuous white noise through a set of headphones.
It sounds bizarre, yeah, but biologically, it's a highly targeted form of sensory deprivation. The brain is an engine of prediction, right?
Yeah.
It constantly wants input from the eyes and ears.
Right, it's always hungry for data.
Exactly. And when you suddenly deprive the visual and auditory cortex of anything meaningful to process, so just featureless red light and static, the brain stops having to work so hard to map the physical environment. The survival filter essentially gets bored and relaxes.
Okay, so it's like you're turning down the loud, distracting static on the radio dial. You twist the knob just enough to cut out the local noise, and suddenly your brain starts searching for a signal elsewhere.
And it finds one. The data from decades of Ganzfeld experiments shows statistically significant results.
Really?
Yes. When a receiver is in that sensory-deprived state and a sender in a completely different isolated room focuses on an image or a video clip, the receiver is able to pick up on those thoughts at rates far above random chance. The filter is lowered, and the signal gets through.
Okay, so sensory deprivation works in a controlled, isolated basement lab. But if we are all truly connected to this cloud all the time, shouldn't we see these data leaks happening out in the wild, like without the ping pong balls?
Oh, we absolutely do. And the literature refers to these as telesomatic events.
Telesomatic.
Yeah, a term coined by neuropsychiatrist Berthold E. Schwartz back in the 1960s. Telesomatic essentially translates to distant body.
Okay.
These are documented instances where a shared mind bridges two physical bodies in real time, often during moments of extreme trauma.
Right, the text had a crazy example of this.
Yes. The classic research example is a mother who suddenly doubles over in her kitchen, feeling this agonizing, searing pain in her right hand. And she later discovers that at that exact moment, miles away, her daughter's right hand was severely burned in an accident.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Because a mother feeling emotional distress is one thing, but actual
searing physical pain.
Physical pain, yes.
The research draws a parallel between this and quantum entanglement, but I really need to push back on that. Entanglement is for subatomic particles, right? Like electrons in supercooled vacuum chambers instantly mirroring each other.
Right.
You're talking about two complex, warm biological bodies separated by miles. I mean, are you saying that telesomatic events are just quantum entanglement happening on a macro human scale? We are literally subatomic particles reacting to each other.
Well, it's the most controversial and honestly thrilling frontier of this science. For a long time, physicists said exactly what you just said. The warm, messy biological environment of the human body is way too noisy to sustain quantum states.
Right, it shouldn't work.
But the emerging field of quantum biology is proving that wrong. We now know that plants use quantum superposition to optimize photosynthesis.
No way.
Yeah. And birds use quantum entanglement in their retinas to navigate magnetic fields.
So biological life has already figured out how to harness quantum mechanics.
Precisely. And if consciousness operates at a fundamental quantum level, then a mother and daughter aren't just emotionally bonded. Their neural networks might literally share entangled states.
That is wild.
In quantum physics, when two particles are entangled, changing the spin of one instantly changes the spin of the other, whether they are an inch apart or across the galaxy. There is zero time delay.
Wow.
So if the mind is non-local, the daughter's trauma doesn't have to travel across physical space to reach the mother. In the cloud, they occupy the exact same space.
That is heavy. And it isn't just human-to-human connection either. The sources talk about a kind of planetary Wi-Fi router, the Schumann resonance.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is where human biology locks perfectly into planetary physics.
I loved this part.
It's fascinating. The Earth's atmosphere, specifically the cavity between the surface and the ionosphere, is constantly struck by lightning, which creates a natural pulsing electromagnetic frequency. And the average baseline of that pulse is 7.83 hertz.
And this was the huge aha moment for me in the research, because the human brain's average alpha frequency, which is the exact state of relaxed meditative awareness where healing and deep focus occur, miraculously overlaps exactly at 7.83 hertz.
It is definitely not a coincidence. I mean, we evolved inside this cavity. Our biology is literally tuned to the planet's time-varying magnetic fields.
Right.
It provides a highly plausible mechanism for why practices like deep meditation, Qigong, or therapeutic touch are so remarkably effective. When you consciously slow your brainwaves down to that alpha state, you are basically entraining your personal antenna to match the exact micropulsations of the Earth.
You are syncing your biology to the global network.
You are.
Which scales up to something massive, like the Global Consciousness Project. This was an initiative out of Princeton University's Peer Lab, and honestly, it sounds like science fiction.
It really does.
They took 100 random number generators, which are basically electronic coin flippers designed to just spit out a continuous, meaningless stream of ones and zeros, and place them in cities all over the globe.
Right. And by definition, a random number generator shouldn't care if there's a war breaking out or if the World Cup is happening. It operates on quantum tunneling. It is the gold standard of true randomness.
But over a decade of rigorous experimentation, they found that during major globally synchronized events, so times like 9/11 or the tragic death of Princess Diana, when millions of human minds were suddenly focused on the exact same emotion at the exact same time, the machines stopped being random.
Yes.
Order actually appeared in the data where there should have been absolutely none.
The collective focus of human consciousness literally reached out and organized the random output of physical machines across the globe.
I mean, the numbers in the text are staggering. The odds of those machines deviating from chance exactly during those global events were estimated at 35 trillion to 1. Trillion!
That's unbelievable.
We really have to slow down and let that sink in. This isn't just some statistical anomaly. It is empirical evidence that collective human intention physically alters reality. Human emotion literally changed math.
And when you connect that back to the bigger picture, the implication is pretty undeniable. Our minds are globally linked, and they are capable of interacting directly with the physical world without the use of our bodies.
Right.
Which naturally leads us to the ultimate question in consciousness studies. What happens when your physical receiver, your body, is turned off completely?
Yeah, the big question. To get into that, we have to talk about Robert Monroe. Bob Monroe. It's 1958.
Right.
Monroe is a highly successful radio broadcasting executive, a totally grounded, pragmatic guy. He's lying in bed, testing out a sleep learning tape he'd created, and suddenly he finds himself floating near the ceiling.
He looked down, and he can actually see his own physical body still lying in the bed.
It was terrifying for him. I mean, he genuinely thought he was either dying or experiencing a severe psychiatric break.
Who wouldn't?
Exactly. But his analytical line took over. This experience propelled him to study the phenomenon obsessively, which eventually led to the creation of the Monroe Institute and the development of hemisync audio technology.
The science behind hemisync is so elegant. It uses something called binaural beats to essentially hack the brain's frequency. If you play a pure audio tone of 440 hertz in your right ear and a tone of 450 hertz in your left ear, your brain doesn't just hear a messy chord of two different sounds.
No, the brain's auditory processing centers attempt to reconcile the discrepancy. It actually synchronizes the electrical activity of the right and left hemispheres to bridge the gap, and in doing so, it fabricates a third, phantom beat inside the mind.
Wow.
It perceives a beat of 10 hertz, which is the exact mathematical difference between the two tones.
So it basically forces the brain to follow the frequency. And Monroe discovered that by inducing these highly specific, synchronized states, he could reliably facilitate out-of-body experiences, or OBEs, bypassing the filter entirely.
Which is fascinatingly similar to what happens involuntarily during near-death experiences, or NDEs. During cardiac arrest, patients frequently report separating from their physical bodies, hovering above the operating table, and experiencing a hyper-vivid, expanded awareness.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here for a second because it's the obvious counter-argument.
Sure.
Skeptics, and plenty of traditional neuroscientists, would argue that Monroe was just having a lucid dream. And as for NDEs, they say it's just a dying brain, starved of oxygen, firing off random neurochemicals and hallucinating as the lights go out.
Right, the hallucination hypothesis.
Yeah, so how does Dr. Davis or anyone else distinguish a biological hallucination from an actual, genuine out-of-body experience?
Well, they distinguish it through a heavily documented concept called veridical perception.
Veridical perception.
Yes. This is the hammer that breaks the hallucination argument. Veridical perception is when a patient who is clinically dead, meaning flatlined heart, and a completely flat EEG, zero electrical activity in the cerebral cortex, reports highly accurate, specific details about their physical surroundings that they could not possibly have known or guessed.
Wait, you're talking about cases like the patient who wakes up days later and tells the stunned nurse exactly where a specific surgical tool was dropped?
Yes.
Or describes a unique piece of equipment that was wheeled into the room after they were clinically dead?
Exactly. Or describing what a family member was wearing out in the waiting room down the hall? A brain with a flat EEG has no biological mechanism to process visual information, let alone encode it into memory.
Right, the hardware is off.
Exactly. You cannot hallucinate accurate, verifiable data about a room you never saw with your physical eyes. The survival of this specific data proves that the conscious observer exists and can interact entirely independent of the biological hardware.
Okay, my mind is thoroughly blown, but it forces us to confront the biggest question of all.
Let's hear it.
If consciousness survives without the body, and if human intention can bend the math of random number generators, whose servers are we running on? Like, who or what is hosting this entire cloud we are accessing?
This is where we arrive at the simulation materialization model, or the SMM.
Okay.
This hypothesis is built on the absolute bleeding edge of physics. It suggests that our material reality isn't a fixed, solid thing at all. It is governed at a quantum level by what theorists call a master intelligence, or a superior data processing system.
And to understand the SMM, you don't need a PhD in quantum mechanics. You just need to understand the basic concept of quantum superposition, which is the idea that a particle exists in an infinite number of potential states until an observer forces it to pick one. The SMM just scales that up to the entire universe.
Exactly. The parallel universes of quantum physics aren't physical alternate dimensions you can travel to in a spaceship. They are a massive realm of pure potentialities.
Just floating data.
Right. The universe is essentially a soup of data. The master intelligence, or the system, acts as the ultimate universal observer. It constantly collapses the wave function, choosing which of those infinite floating possibilities actually materializes into the concrete 3D reality we walk around in.
It's almost like a video game engine. The environment doesn't render into a solid tree or a building until the player character actually looks at it. The system computes the data into physical reality on demand.
Yes, and it perfectly aligns with the great physicist David Bohm's theory of the implicate order.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Bohm proposed that the physical, observable universe we see, what he called the explicate order, is essentially a projection. It is being driven and organized by a covert underlying mental universe that is entirely connected through quantum entanglement.
Oh, wow.
The physical world is just the shadow cast by the cloud.
Okay, so if that's true, if humanity is literally just a giant, entangled network projecting reality together, does that make each one of us a single neuron firing inside a much larger cosmic brain?
That is precisely the metaphor all this evidence points toward. When you synthesize Bob Davis's work, the Ganzfeld telepathy, the Earth's resonance, the vertical perception during flat lines, it reveals a profoundly consistent truth.
Which is?
We are not isolated islands of thought trapped inside bone. We are interdependent nodes. Our brains are receivers, constantly trading information with the whole.
So what does this all mean for you listening to us right now? Why should you care about quantum wave collapses and 7.83 hertz frequencies on your drive to work?
Good question.
It matters because this paradigm shift fundamentally changes the moral architecture of how we interact with the world.
Absolutely. The traditional materialist view encourages a very self-serving, isolated ego. It's me versus the universe.
Right.
But if you actually internalize this research, if you realize your mind is literally entangled with everyone else's, if another person's trauma can physically register in your own nervous system, then compassion isn't just a nice, fluffy moral idea anymore.
It's physical.
Compassion becomes a law of physics. Empathy becomes a scientific necessity for the health of the system.
Harming someone else is quite literally harming a different part of yourself. Understanding this interdependence really feels like the required next step for our evolution. The choices you make, the things you focus your attention on, they don't just stay trapped inside your skull.
No, they don't.
They ripple out through that implicate order, affecting the physical systems and the conscious experiences of everyone else logged into the network.
We are co-creators of this reality, which means we bear a collective responsibility for what we are rendering.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder as we wrap up today's deep dive. Think back to that radio antenna tuning into the invisible signal.
Yeah.
If humanity truly is a global neural network, and your consciousness is constantly connected to this massive cosmic cloud, what kind of data are you uploading right now? With your daily thoughts, your frustrations, your hidden intentions, are you just reinforcing the noisy, chaotic static, or are you actively helping to clarify the signal for the rest of us?